In Australia, we pay a lot of tax. The highest tax bracket is 47%, which means if you're giving almost 50% of your income to the ATO and then paying off a mortgage with the other 50% that's left, I would encourage people to rethink that.
My name's Jack Henderson, and I'm the founder of Henderson Advocacy. Over the last decade, I've built a $40 million property portfolio across Australia, generating tens of millions of dollars worth of revenue on a yearly basis.
A lot of people think that, the only way to build wealth through property is to buy your own home, live in it, pay down the debt, and then, eventually you will upsize and get a better home, which I think is very old school. I'm a massive proponent of rent vesting, which is renting where you live and then investing elsewhere, which is exactly what I do and have done for the last 10 years.
I think you're the best person to explain why Australians are so obsessed with property.
And it's like a reinforcing behavior, because when something makes you a lot of money, it enforces or reinforces then to do more of that thing. It's a forced savings. Financial success in 2025 is not that fucking hard. As a matter of fact, I believe it's actually the easiest that has ever been.
Property's a long game. That's what we're all told. When is it a good idea to pull out of one?
If you've got a property that hasn't performed all that well and you've owned it for 2, 3, 4 years, if it hasn't performed through a really good market, unlikely to perform in a bad market, right? So I'd probably fuck it off as soon as you can.
Jack, this podcast, it's a community of people that want to grow. So I thought we could start off today's episode talking to a 25-year-old who, their wage has not increased. They're looking at house prices going through the roof. They're hearing their mum and dad say, you need to buy a property. That's how we grew wealth. What would you say to that 25-year-old right now?
What is that 25-year-old struggling with? Like, are they struggling with the noise, or are they struggling with their actual life?
Well, yeah, I guess that's the thing, right? Like when you're hearing all of this news, you're hearing your parents tell you this, that's a tough thing to block out. So what would you say, how would you block out the noise?
Well, I mean, like, the reality is, regardless if you're 25, 18 or 75, my belief is that there's always something, right? Like right now, the main narrative is that property prices are too expensive, the world's in a shambles, whatever it is, it's there's bullshit everywhere. That's never going to go anywhere. It's if it's not one thing, it's going to be something else. A few years ago it was COVID, and that took up the news stream for 2, 3, 4 years. Before that, it was whatever it was. So unless you get good at handling the noise and the shit that the world throws at you, then your life is probably going to be hard regardless of what's happening. So, if I only talk about my own experience, like, you need to limit the noise. I don't own a TV. I really concentrate on what I can control, what I put into my brain, into my body. And, it makes life just a little bit easier, because when you've got lots of things, lots of inputs, that's when you get stuck in an action. You're unsure what to do. You've got so many conflicting opinions. And the reality is life is not easy. It's never going to be easy. And if you want it to be easy, then, you're going to be in for a rude awakening for the rest of your life if you're only 25.
So you worked this out at a very young age. I think I started to work this out at the age of 36, 37 to start blocking out the noise. So how did you do that at such a young age?
It's a good question. I don't know. I had an incredible upbringing, I'm pretty sure. Like, that's the only thing I can put it down to, right? My parents were and still are people who give zero fucks about what anyone else is doing in their lives.
Yep.
They're very much focused on themselves and their family, which is, I'm a part of. And that was ingrained into us. I was always actually someone when I was young worrying about, oh, look what these people are doing and look where they're going and look what they've just bought. My dad was always the one who would say, worry about you. Don't worry about anyone else, because what anyone else is doing doesn't matter. And that stuff didn't really matter at the time. I was not conscious, right? But over time, as you get older, that stuff
sinks in.
Sort of becomes a way of life. And then, I got booted out of school when I was 15 years old. So I've also been a grown up for a very long time. When you're kicked out of school and you go and work in the construction industry as a labourer, you're not treated as a 15-year-old person would be treated at school.
Yeah.
You're treated as a grown up, right?
Yeah.
So you tend to maybe have more accountability than, you usually would for your age. And then I'm also very conscious of it as well. That's another thing now, is like, I understand a lot more about myself than I did 10 years ago. And I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly listening to podcasts, and I'm someone who, I try and be as self-aware as I possibly can. I also I understand everything in my life, good or bad, is my fault. So, it's a good way to live, I think.
Jack, what is it about property that drew you to it for your business, as to grow your wealth? Why property?
Yeah, I'd love to say it was a conscious thing that I did, but the reality is not that. The reason it was property is because at 18, when I'd been saving all my money from when I left school at 15, again, my parents said, "You've got all this money, you've just turned 18. There's one of two things are going to happen. You're either going to go and use it for a good thing, or we can see, just like your brother probably did, which my brother's 4 years older, you're going to go piss it up against the wall and you're going to have no money. So why don't you just go use your money you've got to go buy a property? Once you buy a property, that's, the hardest thing most people do in their life. And then you can go and spend your money on whatever you want." So I bought my first property at 18, and then I was vested into the market, right? So I was interested in what property, was all about, and wealth creation. So it's something that I invested into, and then I gained an interest in, and I understood it. And then as I started to understand it more and more, I become, more involved, and you enjoy it more, right? The things you generally understand more, you enjoy more. So it wasn't like this conscious effort where I was like, a young kid and I always wanted to be in property. It just sort of happened naturally. And, now it's what I do day in, day out, but it's obviously super lucrative. Australians love it because it's what has built the majority of Australians' wealth. Very few Australians have built wealth through other things outside of property. And that's the way our economy is geared. It's the way our brains are geared in Australia. I actually love it. And now I'm so interested in building and design and, all these other facets of sort of property.
We had your first mentor, Chris Gray, on this podcast. We spoke about that lunch that you guys had.
Yeah.
I'd love to
What did he say?
Well, I'd love to hear it from your perspective. What did you get out of that lunch? What did you get out of that experience with him being your mentor? What does he mean to you in your life right now?
For me, when I had that lunch, I grew up in a suburb where a rich person was someone who drove a Land Cruiser and lived on the river, right? And then I met Chris, and it sort of like rewired my brain to what wealth was, because I didn't know that, the life that he was living actually existed. And it was the first time I'd gotten close to someone, like sitting next to someone like that, that was super wealthy, and I was having a conversation about my life with them. And, he's someone who probably didn't realize and still doesn't realize the impact he had on the way that I think and or thought and think now. Like he was someone who's come into my life by YouTube. I was watching YouTube videos. That's how I found out about him. He did a talk, which is still online now, to a group of CPA accountants. I saw that video and he spoke about how property has, done all this stuff for his life, and how you can buy boats and cars and all this jazz with it. And I was like, this guy sounds like my type of guy. And since then, I followed every podcast, every post he did, every seminar he spoke at. I was there. And when I actually got to have that lunch with him, where it was just me and him, it was crazy. It's like rewired my brain, and that's what sort of led me down this path. And now he's a good friend. He actually would never hire me, believe it or not. I wanted to work for him, and he said no, because every time he'd see me out, I was on the piss and I was too loose. So he's like, "You're probably not good for our clients."
Well, he actually told us that you, at that lunch, he could tell that you had that hunger to succeed, and he knew you would do you would do really well in the market, in the property market. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, we're actually I've got a text I need to reply to on my phone from him. We don't chat all that much now, once every few months. But we're going to do this speaking tour where it's going to be called The Master and the Apprentice.
Yeah.
And, we're going to talk about his journey and how his journey has influenced me and how I'm doing it now in 2025. So that'll be really, really cool. But, Chris was someone who, I aspired to be like. I literally followed his playbook, play by play, and it worked. So, I think, I don't know where I'd be if I didn't find his videos. Maybe I would have found someone else's videos, because I was sort of wired that way to want success. But I think it's important for everyone. I spoke at a panel the other night to a bunch of people, and they asked me around mentors and what mentors meant to me. And I think it's like the most important thing ever for someone, like trying to find someone who you resonate with their story, you resonate with their journey, what they're about, and then literally just follow their footsteps. Don't try and find 10 people that you want to follow. Just find one person and follow that one person's, footpath. And eventually you probably will outgrow that person, right? But you can get a very, very long way by following just one person's journey until you need to find that next person.
Jack, what's it like for you now being somebody else's mentor? I saw you recently posted on your Instagram. There was a young kid who came to you for work experience, and he just kept showing up, and now you've hired him.
Monty.
Yeah.
It's weird, I get recognized in public like daily. Every time I go somewhere, someone stops me and says, "I love your content," and all this jazz. And it's a little bit bizarre, right? Because I don't look at myself like that. I'm just a normal knockabout guy who enjoys life and shares his property stuff online, and people really like it. But it does feel strange, it's a weird thing, but it's cool. But it's probably because I'm still quite young, and Monty, for example, he's 17 years old. I'm 29 years old, but I don't feel 12 years older than him. I still feel a similar age.
Yes.
So it's a little bit weird. I'm like, dude, just don't look up to me. Go find someone else.
Yeah.
We have someone that we both follow, and I've been following this guy for a long time. That is Gary Vaynerchuk. And when did you get around his content, and what has he taught you about showing up online and building that personal brand that you have, where you are getting recognized in the streets?
I've been following Gary for like 10 or 12 years, I reckon. It's been a long time, maybe longer than that. And, same thing, right? Like Chris was a mentor, Gary was a mentor, but just indirectly a digital mentor who he wouldn't even know I exist.
Yeah.
And, the reason that I built the business the way that I have, and the reason that my first employee was a videographer and not a salesperson or an EA or anything like that, was because of Gary. Like, he harped on and still harps on about content, content, film everything, document everything, put it out online, do it for a long period of time. People will find out who you are. Like, even my content strategy is Gary Vaynerchuk content strategy. It's like long form pieces of content like this, create reels, create a podcast, create long form video for YouTube, create articles and LinkedIn posts off the back of that. Like, that's all because of Gary. So, same thing. I just ripped the playbook from him, of which he was giving out for free, and I actually went and implemented it. So yeah, like all these people who have been there and done it and are consistently doing it and are giving out the information for free, if people don't implement it, they are stupid. Like, it's never been as easy as it is right now in 2025 to be successful. Like, to get the access you can get to information and to like the world's most successful people who now put out content, all you need to do is listen to what they say and then actually go put it into practice, and you'll be amazed that it actually works, believe it or not. It's like, Alex Formosi now is someone that I've done a lot of work with over the last 24 months, him and his team. And the same thing, like I do what he says. I follow the playbook of him and acquisition.com. And again, believe it or not, it works.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who is wanting to do exactly what you've done, where, you're watching all of these people that are putting out content, they're doing it really well, like you, and then they get the camera out and they just feel awkward, for those first few videos, and then they give up? What would you say? How did you break through that process?
That was me. So my girlfriend, who's still my partner now, when I first started producing content, she would set up like a little Sony sort of camera on a tripod before I had a videographer, and I was doing this when I was still in the mining industry. She would set it up in our lounge room. I would sit on the lounge, and she would have to leave the room. And I used to do this series called Back on the Couch, and I would talk about something to do with property, right? And they are so cringe now when I look at them. I'm like, fuck me, what was I doing? But like, it's how everyone starts.
Yeah.
And like, not very, very, very few people would have ever seen those videos, and no one would remember them now, right? Because no one remembers any of that shit when all of a sudden you become more successful. So everyone starts like that. It's just hard to understand that when you're looking at someone's, page 100 of their 150 page story, not page 1.
Yeah.
So you just need to do it, right? And that's the difference between people who generally make it and people who don't make it. It's that the people who make it are just the ones who do maybe 10% more effort than everyone else. It's not like they're, 2 or 3 or 400% better than the average punter. It's literally like 1 or 2 little things that they've done that other people or most people won't do that has given them the momentum to then get the success that they've had. And generally the reason those people take those actions that become successful from what I've seen is because they have a chip on their shoulder, or they've got, they've got something that they're trying to prove to someone or to the world. And that's the thing that drives them through those like awkward moments or moments of like, oh, fuck, I'm going to give up. Like, it's like, do I want to give up and do I accept the awkwardness? Or will I be more annoyed that I'm gonna like let this person be right with what they've said about me, or the person I'm trying to prove wrong, right? So he's like that driver that pushes you through those moments. And the most successful people in the world, if you listen to their origin stories, it's generally because of something that's happened in their life. You look at Elon Musk; he's had the most turbulent life ever. Crazy upbringing. If anyone's read his book, and like that's probably part and parcel of the reason he is right now, outside of just being a fucking genius. So, you need it. You just need to have something to drive you and push you through it. But everyone starts there, and no one's incredible at everything.
We have quite a large audience over in the US, Europe, and the UK, and I think you're the best person to explain why Australians are so obsessed with property.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know why there's like how the obsession started. I know why people are obsessed now, and it's like a reinforcing behavior, because when something makes you a lot of money, it enforces or reinforces then to do more of that thing, right? It's like, well, it makes money. Well, we'd be stupid not to continue to do it. And that's just, come down from generation to generation to generation. As it probably has in other parts of the world as well. I'm not privy to what happens in Europe and the UK and, the US, but it's an easy to understand asset. It's an asset that you can use a lot more of someone else's money to buy versus your own money, being the bank. It's an asset class where it's a forced savings. For example, if you needed to go and get $1 million in shares, invest to build $1 million asset base in shares, you would have to consistently invest in shares every single week for a long time. And as soon as something bad happens in your life, or you get thrown a curveball, generally the first thing to stop are things like that. I'll stop investing. I'll get back to that later. Whereas with property, once you buy, you are forced to pay a mortgage, right? Because the bank will take your house if you don't. So that's why I think real estate has been more successful for the majority of people, is because when you buy it, you don't have an option not to continue to invest in it. It's not very liquid. So if the market goes up or down or something happens in the world, you can't just sell it on a whim because you get worried, because it takes time to get in and out of real estate, and it's expensive, which means people will stay in the asset longer than they would inside of something which is more liquid and, they can sort of be more reactive with. Plus, a lot of people before us have made a lot of money out of it. So it's like, well, if my dad and my dad's dad and my dad's dad's dad has also made a lot of money out of real estate, then I would be dumb to think I can't do the same.
Yeah, totally. Jack, why is paying off a mortgage such a bad idea?
Well, it's not a bad idea. If you have a mortgage that is tied to an owner-occupier home, it's probably a good idea to pay it off because it's non-deductible interest, right? Which means you pay for it with your after-tax income. So in Australia, we pay a lot of income tax. The highest tax bracket is 47%, which means if you're giving almost 50% of your income to the ATO and then paying off a mortgage with the other 50% that's left, you want to pay it off as fast as you possibly can. Yeah. But if you don't have one of those mortgages yet, I would encourage people to rethink that. And when I say rethink that, I mean rethink getting one, because a lot of people think that, the only way to build wealth through property is to buy your own home, live in it, pay down the debt, and then, eventually you will upsize and get a better home, which I think is very old school. I'm a massive proponent of rent vesting, which is renting where you live and then investing elsewhere, which is exactly what I do and have done for the last 10 years. Because then all of your debt becomes tax deductible because it's paid for with pre-tax income. And when you rent in a nice suburb, you generally can rent the homes for 50% or even 30% of what it costs the same person to own that property.
Yeah.
So from a financial point of view, it makes way more sense. I mean, people have the sentimental attachment to living in their own home and they think that they can paint the walls and put the picture up and never get kicked out. I don't buy into that. I've never been kicked out of a rental. I do whatever I want to the rental and I just fix it when I leave. So it's a different way of thinking. But if you don't have a big owner-occupier mortgage already, I would encourage you probably not to get one. Go and rent that home, which you were going to get a mortgage on, and go and get debt that becomes tax deductible because you're being more efficient with your money.
If I had 100 grand right now and I wanted to buy a property, where would I put that? In your opinion, where's the best place to put it?
Well, if you're someone who doesn't own any real estate currently, I would encourage people to explore using the first home buyer incentives, right? Like after I just said, don't go buy your own home. If you're a first home buyer in Australia, it's the easiest way to get into the market. You need a 5% deposit, and in most states, you won't pay stamp duty or lender's mortgage insurance up to a certain price point. So the easiest way to get into the market as a first home buyer is to use the first home buyer schemes, and then eventually turn that home into an investment after the period that you have to live in it. 100 grand would get you into, most property markets. The thing that people struggle with is serviceability, which is how much money they can borrow based on their income. But we're big advocates for, if you're in New South Wales, we love Central Coast, we love Lake Macquarie, we love Newcastle. If you're in Brisbane, we love sort of within 20 k's of the city. We love the Gold Coast. In Victoria, which is where I am now in our Melbourne office, we're massive fans of within sort of 15 k's of the city if you can afford it. If you can't afford it, places like Frankston and Geelong. They're all established marketplaces. They're all going through gentrification. They're all close to the water. And over a long period of time, they will do very well, as they have up until to this point. But it's important to remember that the first property you buy is not going to be the last property you buy, hopefully. And the most important thing is just getting into the market so you can reap the benefits of the market. I think what too many people do is they get caught up in, I would never live in that property. I don't want to live in that suburb. It's not where my mum and dad grew up, blah, 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 blah. And they sit on the sidelines for too long. And, as we've learned, the marketplace has no feelings for anyone. It doesn't care, how you feel about it. It doesn't care about whether you think it's too expensive. The market is the market and it will do what it does.
I was on the Gold Coast, and I had a property on the Gold Coast during COVID. And as you know, it was a really strange time for Queensland with property prices. Just numbers were going through the roof. Do you think we'll ever see something like that again? Or is that just a once in our lifetime kind of scenario where house prices were, going up like rockets?
I mean, the reason house prices were growing so rapidly was because of the unbelievable amount of money that was printed during COVID, right? It was like stimulus. That's what happens. They cut interest rates, they print money, and that does one thing, and it drives the economy and inflates asset prices. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the guy by the name of Ray Dalio. I'm assuming you have. One of the world's best investors. He's wrote a lot of books, a series of books. The first one he wrote was called Principles. He's had other books since then called The Changing World Order. He's got a new one out now, which is How Countries Go Broke. And what is incredibly good at teaching is what we think are new things happening in the world and what, will never happen again, have often happened many, many, many times in the past. They just haven't happened in our lifetime. So, what happened in COVID has happened before. There has been many different, outbreaks in the world that were significantly worse than COVID, by the way. And there has been many different financial crashes. There has been many different changes of world powers and of, world currencies. We just don't know about them or don't remember them because we weren't around. So do I think it'll happen again? You can near bet your life it'll happen again. Will it happen in our lifetime? I've got no idea. But the world has this funny way of repeating itself over and over and over again. And that's what I've learned from Ray Dalio and the books that he's written. He talks about this time in his life where I think it was when, I can't remember the name of the US president, but they were essentially changing the US dollar. Instead of being exchangeable for gold, it was now a fiat currency. And he thought, well, if that's going to happen, then the marketplaces are going to, decrease dramatically. Except the opposite happened, and he lost a huge amount of money because he obviously bet the wrong way. And after that happened to him and he lost a lot of money for himself and his clients, he went back and researched, and this had happened many times in the past, and the same thing had happened. The marketplace has rallied. So he talks about that experience of him going, well, it hadn't happened in my lifetime. It had happened before many times in history. So often we just need to look back before we were born, and we will notice these patterns happening over and over and over again. And that's why I don't really get concerned about, well, what happens if, we're in this debt bubble, and what happens if blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it's happened before. Probably went through some pretty turbulent times, but we're around now and it's never been better. And I would much rather be born today than to be born 200 years ago.
Yeah. Jack, how do you feel about Bitcoin? Like, you're investing in, I'm sure, not just property.
Yeah. I mean, look, I don't know much about Bitcoin. I know people have made a significant amount of money on it. I know, well, a lot of clients who have made lots of money through not just Bitcoin, but crypto in general. And it's just not my jam, I think it's obviously serious. It's fucking being invested in by some of the world's biggest institutions. But you can't know everything about everything. And one of the things that I've learned from Hormozy and his team is focus is one of the most important things, right? So if Bitcoin's your jam, then amazing. I'm assuming you're going to make a fuckload of money of it if you're good. But if property's your jam, you can make just as much money of it if it is your jam. And if business is your jam or shares are your jam, whatever it is, you just need to be focused on one thing and understand that thing better than anyone else understands it. They always say the riches are in the niches, right? So you need to know your thing. And I know property. I love property. I'm passionate about property. So I would be silly to go and spend time exploring Bitcoin or anything else like that. Because it's not my thing and I don't understand it and I'm not passionate about it, and I'd only be doing it to make money. And that's generally when you don't make any money.
That's such great advice, because we can all get distracted by, thinking back, if I bought 3 Bitcoin back in 2010, I'd be minted now, or, like all these kinds of things.
Funny. It's a funny thing, but that, I've heard that many times, whether it's real estate, whether it's Bitcoin, it's not actually true. Because if you were to, like, everyone, they say that, right? If I would have bought 1 Bitcoin back then, I'd be worth X amount of money now. But the reality is you wouldn't be, because Bitcoin went from $0 to $100 to $1,000 to $200 to, $100,000 back there. Like, you had to have held through all the ups and downs, which no one would have, because as soon as you would have made some money, people liquidate because they want the capital, right? So it's like, if you held through the thousands of ups and downs and terrible news in the media and all the rest of it, then you'd be super wealthy.
Yeah.
But no one does that, and no one would have done that because you want to take money off the table and you never think it's going to get to that point. So that's a very important thing to notice. Like, lots of people say, oh, I should have done this and I should have done that and I wish I bought back then. But they wouldn't have gotten the outcome that they think they would have gotten because they wouldn't have been disciplined enough to hold through all the good times and the bad times, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same saga in real estate. It's like, oh, I could have bought a house for $20,000 and $100,000 and whatever it is. And it's like, you could have, but you wouldn't have, because you still would have been saying the same narrative you're saying right now. Property's too expensive. Property's never going to grow. Blah, 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 right? The same narrative's been around for 100 plus years.
Yeah.
You're running a highly successful business. What do you spend most of your day doing inside the business?
So now it's very much team, training, hiring, making them happy, making them perform better. I spend a lot of time creating media, so content, doing things like this. I'm still involved in clients. So before this, I had 3 one-hour client calls. After this, I've got another 1-hour client call. So I'm still on the tools every now and then. I'm working on the business a lot, thinking at new offers, thinking about strategy and, the avenues we're going down and all the rest of it. So, I'm doing the things that try and move the needle the most. But at the end of the day, like, sometimes I get to the office and I haven't got much in my calendar for the day and I feel lost. I feel anxious. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? What should I be doing today? Where's my time best spent? And it gets to 11 o'clock and I've done nothing. I've achieved nothing. I've just walked around the office, said hello to people, had a coffee, made phone calls I didn't need to make, like scrolled Instagram. So I'm definitely not perfect and I definitely still get lost all the time. And I'm always looking for the right thing to do. But like when you're at the top of an organization and there's no one leading you, you get lost, right? There's things that you don't understand. I've never done this before. I've never ran and grown a company before. I've got amazing people around me, but it's not like they're in my shoes every day. But now it's really about working on the company to grow the company. I'm not in the weeds every day as such. Like, we've got 100 odd employees across the organization. So fortunately, I'm less in the weeds now. I'm more working on the business, but I still do a lot of client-facing work.
I love hearing that you're at the top. You've got no one leading you, and you do get lost sometimes. I think that's hard for a lot of leaders to actually admit that. Everyone wants to sound like they know exactly what they're doing. So that comes down to hiring the best people to be around you. Like you said, you've got a great team around you. So what's your hiring process? What do you go through to find the people in your team?
I think a lot of people in my team now who run it, like my general manager of Henderson, my general manager of the building company Endeavour, my sales manager, like all these, the guys who run my Newcastle office, the guys who run my Brisbane office, they're people who have just come into my life, generally not from an ad on Seek or LinkedIn or anything like that. They're people who have come into my life from random places. Like I met my GM of the building company through another friend many, many, many years before I had a company, through training. Like we used to train of a morning in Newcastle. And as you build a relationship with someone over a period of time and they see you become more successful and all the rest of it, like you start to attract, what are you doing now? Is there any way I can add value? My general manager on my advocacy business, the buyer's agency, I met through an introduction from another friend who he just got back from Dubai. He was a CEO of Abbey Road Institute globally, was looking for his next thing in Australia, and somehow I landed him. So it's things like that, I think like obviously we've had success with advertising and trying to headhunt people and all the rest of it. But generally the best hires I think for us have come from like our inner network or people who have seen me, out on the field and they've reached out to me. Like my sales manager, like constantly kept seeing me out and about and, wasn't enjoying his own role and he reached out to me via Facebook. My head of my Newcastle operation and also another shareholder in the building company was my housemate in Newcastle. He's been with me from day one since I started the business. So the guy who runs our Brisbane office was a client first, is a police officer to begin with. And then like it's just random places where people come out. And that's what's so important about putting yourself out there and being seen and, being authentically yourself, is because you attract the people that are like you and that want to work with people like you, and you repel the people who dislike you, which is exactly what you want to do. So I'd love to say, like, now I've got a head of people and culture and we're running ads here, there and everywhere, and they're doing bloody 20 interviews a day and we hire and fire a lot of people. But like our key hires have been people who have just come from the strangest of places.
The ones that cut through the noise by the sounds of things.
Yeah, exactly right. And the really cool thing is now, which I'm seeing in the organization, is as you start to attract more and more and more people who are very similar to one another and want similar things, they attract more of those people, which is crazy, right? And I'm not around all the time now in every office. We've got offices all over the country and I travel and I don't get to meet every single person before they start and all the rest of it. So the awesome thing is I'm not the one who now needs to say, hey, that person doesn't fit in with our organization. It's not good for them and it's not good for us. They need to go. My team now knows that before I know that. And they tell me, hey, this person's not right for us.
Yeah.
This person is not, this is not Henderson. They're not living to a high standard. They don't have extreme accountability. They're not, forgotten what our last value is, extreme accountability and unwavering commitment. They're not super committed, so they don't belong in our organization.
Yeah.
That's the amazing thing now, is I don't have to make that decision. My team do it for me. And that's the really cool thing about building a team of killers.
Property is a long game. That's what we're all told a lot of the time. When is it a good idea to pull out of one? Or like if you've got a dud, because some people get very emotional, how would you go about getting rid of one?
Yeah, it happened to my parents, right? Like they bought a property, held it for 11 years and sold it for less than what they paid for it. An off the plan apartment in in the Sunshine Coast. And they knew it was a dud property 5-6 years before they sold it. But, we have this confirmation bias, which is like, oh no, it'll grow eventually. The market will turn. And although that may happen and that may be true, every year that you hold it and it doesn't perform, there's opportunity cost in that. It's not just the actual property itself. It's what that property's holding you back from doing that could be much better. So if you've got a property that hasn't performed all that well and you've owned it for 2, 3, 4 years, chances are, like, if it hasn't performed through a really good market and a relatively okay market now, I'm likely to perform in a bad market, right? So
Yeah.
I'd probably fuck it off as soon as you can.
I love it.
Yeah. So
Is this,
you just got to be
is this
like
how you talk on the
super
client
objective.
call that you're going to be doing next as well?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
awesome.
that's the truth.
Yeah. I
That's
love
the
it.
truth.
Yeah.
It's how I talk every day to everyone.
That's
I mean.
awesome.
I love it. Yeah. So Jack, would a lot of what Chris told us is always buy in blue chip areas. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my strategy is Chris's strategy, and I've just put Jack Henderson's sauce on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Chris's strategy is someone else's strategy. He just put Chris Gray's sauce on it,
Totally.
right? So again, it's following the footsteps of people who have been there and done it. So it's always buying blue chip, and blue chip looks different in every state. And it also looks different in different budgets as well. Like blue chip is different. If you've got a $10 million budget, blue chip is different from $1 million budget.
Mm.
But blue chip virtually just means, in my eyes, buy the best quality asset you can afford to buy for your budget in the best quality location. You want to buy in a marketplace that's dominated by owner-occupier buyers, for example. If you buy in a market which is dominated by investors buy with their heads and not with their hearts, which means, when the marketplace is a bit choppy and the returns maybe aren't as good or don't look as good, they stop buying, which means your property is going to feel the impacts of that. Owner-occupiers, on the other hand, they buy regardless of the market conditions. They buy based on emotion.
Yeah.
They're buying because they want to be close to the school, and their children start high school next year and they need to be in the catchment or whatever it is. Like, there's always a reason for an owner-occupier to buy a home. So if you're around those kinds of people and those kinds of properties, the marketplace is relatively consistent. And you also want to buy an asset that's scarce in nature. So, like, you look at any suburb around Australia, 95% of the properties are similar block size, similar construction type, similar build year. They all look similar. But then there's that 5% of properties that's unique. They've got a bigger block, they're on better streets, they're close to certain things, and they always sell for premiums.
Mm.
And they're the ones you want to buy, right? Ideally, because they will continue to become more and more scarce as time goes on.
Jack, talk to us about your new business venture. I saw you started a wedding function space, I guess, with your partner. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So the way that come about was, I've got a relatively big portfolio and I pay a lot of land tax. And I was exploring ways to not pay land tax because it's expensive and it annoys me. And anyway, I'm doing research and I work out that on rural farmland where you can be a primary producer, you get land tax exemptions. And I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, let's look at this. So I wanted to buy a farm. A property come up that I actually knew the owners of many years ago, and it's 1,500 acres. And I'm like, fuck, this is great property. It would be an incredible venue. And then my partner used to be in events, but she used to do kids' party events. So, like, you take your daughter or your son and 20 of their friends to her venue, and she'd entertain them for 3 or 4 hours. And I said to her, hey, I love real estate. You love events. I don't have to pay land tax if I buy this, and you don't have to sell $1,000 parties anymore. You can sell $50,000 weddings. How does that sound? And that's literally how that come about. And it's been a raging success to date. Because not only is it a real estate asset, I also get to, inject what I've learned in growing a service-based business. I know how to market. I know how to run ads. I understand operations at a high enough level. And when you can inject like business smarts and implementation into a real estate asset, some really cool shit happens. And I guess if you look at like the major hospitality players in the country, like Justin Hems from Merrydale and, there's a million and one of them,
Yeah.
right? The reason they're so successful is because not only do they have an incredible business, but they also own the real estate assets. So it's like a McDonald's. So yeah, it's a very fun and exciting project, and it's sort of a combination of everything that we're doing. And I'm fortunate enough to have a partner that obviously runs it, and I don't really have much to do with the day-to-day.
Jack, we end every one of our episodes with our guests sharing an item that is important to them. Is there an item that you have there that you'd like to share with us today?
The one thing that I never go without these days is my Whoop band. I know this sounds corny as all shit, but like as you generally become more successful, your health becomes more important as well. I think as a society, we're becoming way more health conscious. And I'm someone who is like an all or nothing type of person. So To give context, like when I drink, I'm like a different person, and it's not good. I start on a Friday, and you'll probably see me on Sunday. So the reason I tell you that is because now, since I've become, I'm a crazy runner now, and I do 200-mile runs, and I'm going to the US next year to do a 300-mile run in March. And I'm like obsessed with health now, and I don't drink anymore. I only drink in December or if I'm overseas. So I drink not much at all, and I'm obsessed with like my sleep.
Mhm.
So this morning I woke up, I didn't have much sleep last night because I got home late from a dinner and then got up early to go running. And I had like a 48% sleep recovery, and I was like, it's so annoying. So I'm obsessed now with getting like green sleep every night for people to understand Whoop. Which means it's actually made me not want to drink and not want to do any of those other things even more, because I know it'll affect my sleep. Like now I'm like, I can't eat after 6, and I obviously can't drink, and I want to make sure that I'm in bed and I'm not doing anything or having screen time and all that jazz. So it's for someone who has an obsessive personality like me, a Whoop band or something like that's probably not an ideal thing. But I never take it off, and I'm looking at it daily. But it's obviously a good thing, right?
Love it.
Totally. Jack, if someone's made it to this time in the episode, right towards the end, they obviously love everything that you're saying. So is there something that you want to say to that person?
Yeah, so something I think a lot about is every single one of us is going to end up in the same place, which is death. And I just think a lot of people don't understand that, and they don't live like that. Like, every single one of us, unless Elon Musk comes up with some grandiose thing where we don't die, like we're all going to die one day. And I live like that. I'm like, I assess risk like that. I'm like, oh, what's the worst case scenario? I'm going to die one day anyway. Just do it. I make decisions really quickly because of that. I'm like, well, every moment I don't make this decision, then it's eating into my time. And I think if more people lived like that and understood that they actually don't know when they're going to die, neither do I. Everyone's going to die eventually. Could be 50 years time, could be tomorrow. I think you would live life a lot differently, and you would get after your life a lot more. So, that's how I think about it. I think about that stuff a lot, which I think a lot of people should do more of, the inevitable death that we're all facing.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and spending some time with our community. We really appreciate it, mate.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, guys.